There is a whisper in the English landscape. It rises with the sea frat from the chalk cliffs of the south, rolls across the patchwork fields of the Midlands, and settles in the hollows of the northern moors, clinging to the granite toss like a shroud. It is a story told not in words, but in the slow, deep language of stone and root and bone. You can feel it in the ancient trackways that score the hills, pathways worn smooth by the feet of forgotten ancestors. You can sense it in the shadow of a Roman wall cutting a stark line across a wild frontier, or in the moss-claimed stones of an abbey where Gothic arches frame an empty sky. This is a land shaped by the hammer of invasion and the chisel of faith, a place where layers of history are buried, one atop the other, each leaving its ghost behind. This is a land woven on an ancient loom, its threads, the clash of migration and conquest, the murmur of prayer in a Norman church, the ring of a Saxon axe, the echo of a Celtic tongue. But beneath this warp and weft of human history, another wilder pattern endures. It is the old belief that the world is not entirely as it seems. That in the twilight hour, in the heart of a tangled wood, or in the sudden, unnerving silence of a lonely lane, the veil between worlds grows thin, and something else looks through. Here, the land itself has a memory and a power. It is a place where every hill might hold a sleeping king, every dark pool might hide a grasping spirit, and every stormy sky might become a hunting ground for a spectral host. These are not mere fictions. For centuries, they were the living truths that governed the rhythms of life and death. They were the explanations for the inexplicable, the faces given to the forces of nature, and the keepers of a moral order that was far older than any written law. To understand this nation, we must listen for those other voices. We must seek out the figures who walk in its shadows, the heroes, spirits, and monsters who haunt the English imagination. Our journey begins not with the small spirits of the Hedro, but with the very bedrock of the kingdom's soul, with the grand and tragic matter of Britain, with the promise of a king who was and a king who will be. In the fading light of Roman Britain and the chaotic dawn of the Saxon age, the land cried out for a figure of impossible virtue, a king not born to power, but chosen by it. The legend begins not in a throne room, but in the cold churchyard of a London winter, amidst a gathering of the greatest knights of the realm. There set in the earth was a great stone, and upon it an anvil of solid steel. Thrust through the anvil and into the stone was a sword, its hilt unadorned, its blade dark with mystery. On it were inscribed the words that would shape a kingdom. Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone, an anvil is right-wise king, born of all England. One by one, the strongest and noblest men of the age put their shoulders to the task. They strained until the veins stood out on their foreheads, their pride and ambition shattering against the unyielding union of iron and rock. The sword did not stir. It was a divine trial, a declaration that the old ways of succession through might and blood were no longer enough. The land now demanded a different kind of strength, a moral worth that could not be measured in brute force. And so it was a boy, a young squire named Arthur, unaware of his own lineage, who approached the stone not with the arrogance of noblemen, but with the simple need of finding a sword for his knight. He laid his hands on the hilt, and with a pull that felt no more difficult than drawing a blade from a scabbard of silk, the sword slid free. The sound it made was not of grinding metal, but of a lock turning, a destiny being opened. In that moment, sovereignty was redefined. It was no longer a prize to be conquered, but a grace to be granted, a sacred weight that could only be borne by a hand unburdened by ego. Yet even this magical sword was a thing of the mortal world. When its blade later splintered in the fury of battle, Arthur was led to the edge of a vast and silent lake. From the still misty waters rose an arm clad in white samite, its hand holding a new sword, a weapon that seemed forged from moonlight itself. This was Excalibur, and with it came a scabbard that would protect his wearer from any wound. Here was a second, deeper anointment. If the sword in the stone was the approval of the world of men and God, Excalibur was the blessing of the otherworld, the realm of deep magic that lies just beneath the surface of a land. The Lady of the Lake, a being who bridges the world of fairy and the world of humanity, was bestowing upon Arthur an authority that flowed from the very soul of the island itself. Excalibur was not merely a weapon. It was a covenant, a gleaming symbol of the sacred responsibility of power and a perilous reminder of the consequences of its misuse. And so when Arthur's final tragic battle was fought and he lay mortally wounded, his last command was not for his kingdom, but for the sword. He ordered his most loyal knight to return Excalibur to the water. Twice the knight hesitated, unable to cast such a treasure away. But on the third command, he hurled the blade out over the lake. Before it could touch the water, that same arm rose from the depths, caught the hilt, and drew it back into the silent world from whence it came. Power, the legend tells us, is only ever borrowed. Even the noblest reign is temporary, and earthly glory must always be surrendered in the end, as a barge of enchantresses carries the dying king away to the liminal shores of Avalon, the Isle of Apples, where the once and future king awaits his kingdom's greatest need. Where Arthur represents the soul of the nation, another figure arose to become the champion of its faith. He is not a king, but a knight. His enemy, not a Saxon warlord, but a primal terror born of swamp and fear. In the annals of Christendom, few tales are as iconic as that of St. George and the Dragon. The story finds its home near a city poisoned by dread, a community forced into a terrible bargain with a monster that had made its lair in a nearby marsh. The dragon, with its breath of pestilence, personified the encroaching chaos of the pagan world, a force of untamed nature and unholy appetite. At first, the people offered it their livestock, but soon, the beast's hunger turned to the people themselves. In their desperation, they turned to the lottery, offering their own children to the creature to buy another day of survival. When the lot fell to the king's own daughter, the city's grief was absolute. Dressed in a white gown, the symbol of her innocence, she was led out to the marsh to await her fate. At that moment, a stranger appeared, a knight in armor, his shield emblazoned with a red cross. This was George, the archetypal Christian soldier, the embodiment of courage, purity, and missionary zeal. He did not simply charge the beast with brute force. He saw the contest not as a slaughter, but as a deliverance. He wounded the dragon with his lance, and then in an act of profound symbolism, he instructed the princess to use her belt to leash the wounded monster. She led the subdued beast back into the city like a tame hound. Submission, the story suggests, must precede transformation. The forces of chaos must be brought within the walls of the community and made to bow before they could be truly defeated. Before he delivered the final blow, George made a demand not for gold or glory, but for the city's soul. He demanded that the king and his people embrace a new faith. When they agreed, he slew the dragon, and its death signified the triumph of order, the victory of a structured Christian worldview over the primal fears of the old world. In his refusal of any earthly reward, asking only that the king give alms to the poor, George cemented his legend. True heroism, the tale insists, serves a higher cause than personal gain. Its purpose not conquest, but the salvation of the innocent. If St. George embodies the serene triumph of an ordered faith, another legend speaks of a heroism born from its absolute antithesis, the wild anarchic fury of a desecrated mother. Long before the cross was carved on English shields, the land was home to proud tribes, and none were prouder than the Aesii of the eastern lands. After their king died, having willed his kingdom jointly to his daughters and the Roman emperor, the local Roman officials saw only weakness. They ignored the treaty, seized the tribal lands, flogged the widowed Queen Boudica, and violated her daughters. It was an act of profound imperial arrogance, a miscalculation of catastrophic proportions. They believed they were merely punishing a defiant woman. Instead, they had awakened a force of nature. Boudica became the warrior mother archetype, a figure of maternal rage transformed into a political and military revolution. Her grief was not a private sorrow. It became the fury of the land itself, a symbol of indigenous sovereignty violated. She united the neighboring tribes, and her army became a raging firestorm across Roman Britain. The new glittering cities of the empire, Camulodunum, London, and Verulamium, were not merely conquered. They were systematically burned to the ground, razed with a ritualistic intensity. It was a violent, bloody purging of foreign domination, an attempt to cauterize the wound of Roman conquest by erasing its presence from the soil. On the eve of her final battle, Boudica addressed her warriors, her speech framing the conflict in the most existential of terms. Freedom versus subjugation. A life worth living versus a life in chains. Though her forces were ultimately broken by the discipline of the Roman legions at Watling Street, her defeat elevated her to martyrdom. She did not die a failed rebel. She died a timeless symbol of resistance, a warrior queen whose defiance echoes through the ages. A testament to the fact that when the bonds of kinship and dignity are broken, the response can be as terrible and as cleansing as fire. Music heroism, however, is not always clad in the shining mail of a saint or the royal furs of a queen. Sometimes it wears the simple cloth of a farm boy and wields ingenuity as its sharpest weapon. In the age of King Arthur, when the land was still popped with lawless forces, the people of Cornwall lived in terror of the giant Corin. From his fortress atop what is now St. Michael's Mount, the monstrous creature would wade to the mainland to steal livestock. His very presence, an oppressive force that dwarfed the lives of the common folk. Where knights and nobles had failed, a clever farm boy named Jack decided to act. He understood that brute strength could not be met with brute strength. Instead, he studied his enemy and the terrain, and on a moonless night, he dug a deep pit near the mount, covering it with a fragile layer of branches and dirt. At dawn, he blew a horn, and as the enraged giant charged toward the sound, he plunged into the trap. Jack dispatched the beast with a blow from an axe. And in that moment, a new kind of hero was born, the resourceful underdog. Jack's journey continued, his fame spreading as he set out to rid the land of other giants. He faced the man-eating blunderbore, not with a sword, but with trickery, luring him into a noose. Along his travels, he was rewarded with magical gifts. A sword that could kill at a stroke's shoes of swiftness, a cloak of invisibility, and a cap of knowledge. These items were not the source of his power, but rather the favor of enchantment bestowed upon the righteous, amplifying the natural cunning he already possessed. He freed captive nobles and won treasures, his story becoming a powerful allegory for social mobility achieved through merit. The tale culminates in Jack joining the Knights of the Round Table and marrying a duke's daughter. A final symbolic act that integrates the courage of the common man into the highest aristocratic order of the land, proving that in the folklore of England, the truest giants are not those of great size, but those of great oppression, and they can be toppled by the quick thinking of the small. The promise of a hero's return is not confined to the misty shores of Avalon. It is a seed planted deep within the English landscape itself, a secret held in the heart of the living rock. The legend takes us to the rolling hills of Cheshire, to the dramatic sandstone escarpment known as Orderly Edge. Here a poor farmer was leading his white mare to market, his last hope for a few coins to see him through the winter. On the road, he was stopped by a strange old man, cloaked and staff in hand, whose eyes held a wisdom that seemed older than the ancient trees around them. The old man offered a fair price for the horse, but the farmer, hoping for a better offer in the bustling town, refused and continued on his way. He spent a long day in the market shouting himself hoarse, but strangely no buyer would even look at his fine white mare. Disheartened, he began the long walk home, only to find the same mysterious figure waiting for him in the twilight. This time, the farmer agreed to the sale. The wizard did not lead him to a stable, but to the foot of the edge. He waved his wand, and with a sound of grinding stone, A great rock face swung open, revealing a dark passage leading into the earth. Inside was a vast cavern, not damp and lifeless, but filled with a strange, silent energy. Scores of knights in silver armor lay in an enchanted sleep, and beside each one stood a pure white horse, motionless, save for the gentle rise and fall of its breathing. The old man explained that these were the warriors of a long-dead king, waiting for the day of Britain's direst peril, when they would awaken and ride forth to save the land. There was but one horse missing, and the farmer's mare was needed to complete the company. The wizard paid the farmer from a chest spilling with gold and jewels, then escorted him from the cavern. As the rock face sealed behind him, the secret vanished once more, leaving only the wind and the trees. Alderley Edge thus becomes more than a hill. It is a threshold between the mundane and the mythic, a tomb and a womb for the nation's dormant power. The legend is a profound comfort, a promise that true strength is not always visible. It sleeps, hidden in the very soil of the land, watched over by a timeless guardian, awaiting the one final battle when all heroes must return. From the secret sleeping guardians of the wild, we travel to the heart of the nation's power, to the grim stone fortress of the Tower of London. Here the guardians are not sleeping knights, but living, breathing omens, their black wings casting a shadow over the fate of the kingdom. On the green lawns within the battlements, a small flock of ravens strut and croak, their presence governed by a prophecy as binding as any law of the land. The legend holds that if fewer than 6 ravens remain at the tower, both the crown and the kingdom will fall into ruin. This belief is so deeply ingrained that when a monarch once considered removing the birds as a nuisance, he was met with the stark prophecy and decreed instead that they must be kept and protected forever. To this day, they are official residents of the tower, tended to by a raven master. Their wings ceremonially clipped not as an act of cruelty, but as a desperate measure to keep them from straying, lest their absence herald disaster. The practice transforms the tower from a mere historical fortress into a tomb-like site, a place where the nation's destiny is held captive in the form of these intelligent, watchful birds. Ravens have always been creatures of a lineal in folklore, their black feathers and cunning minds connecting them to the other world, to prophecy, and to the battlefields of old gods. In the heart of a modern metropolis, this ancient superstition endures. The state itself engages in a ritual to control its own fate, acknowledging that the security of a kingdom can rest not just on armies and laws, but on the fragile presence of a handful of birds. The Raven Master's role is both practical and sacred, a daily act of stewardship over the fragile symbols of a nation's continuity. The ravens of the tower are a constant living reminder that even in the most fortified centers of human power, magic and the fear of its absence remains the most potent force of all. From the world of kings and their sleeping guardians, our journey now turns away from the high matters of the state and into an older, wilder kingdom. It is a realm that exists parallel to the world of men, a kingdom whose borders are marked by the hedgerow and the forest's edge, and whose laws are written in the language of root and thorn. To enter, it is to step into the green, a place of profound life and deep, unsettling magic. Its denizens are not concerned with the fate of the crown, but with the turning of the seasons, the sanctity of the ancient woods, and the delicate, often broken contract between humanity and the land itself. Imagine stepping from the bright English sunlight into the cool, silent nave of a medieval church. The air is thick with the scent of cold stone, beeswax, and centuries of prayer. High above, light fractures through stained glass, painting the flagstones in hues of sapphire and blood. This is a house of order, a testament to a faith that sought to tame the wildness of the human heart and the pagan world. But draw your eyes away from the altar. Look up into the shadows of the vate ceiling, to the carved bosses where the stone ribs meet, or to the capitals of the pillars that stand like a silent forest. There, if you look closely, you will find a face staring back, a face that does not belong. It is a man, but his hair is a tangle of hawthorn, and from his parted lips, A cascade of oak leaves and acorns spills forth. It is the face of the Green Man. He is the great paradox of sacred architecture, a silent foliate head hiding in the very heart of Christian worship. He appears in 1,000 forms, sometimes serene and godlike, sometimes grotesque and demonic. His leafy disgorgement, a torrent of uncontrollable life. Though he was never named by the masons who carved him, his presence is an unmistakable and powerful constant. He is a man becoming a plant, a symbol of the untamable life force of the natural world. An image so potent that not even the builders of the great cathedrals could bear to leave him outside their walls. His placement is a profound and necessary compromise. The syncretism of the new faith with the old. Was he a captive pagan god forced to watch over the rights of his conqueror? Or was he a tolerated spirit, a symbol of nature's resurrection that the church could cleverly absorb into its own narrative of Christ's rebirth? He is the wild woodland brought inside, the spirit of fertility and regeneration, given a quiet corner in the house of the Christian God. He is the living embodiment of the cycle of death and rebirth. His face carved from cold, dead stone, yet spewing forth the vibrant green of spring. He is a lineal figure bridging the sacred and the profane, a constant, evergreen reminder to all who pray beneath him that nature's resilience, its power to grow back, to reclaim, and to endure is a force that lies just beneath the veneer of civilization. In recent times, his enigmatic face has been claimed as a symbol for a new kind of reverence, an emblem for the modern environmental movement. But he is far older than that. He is the face of the green kingdom, and in the quiet corners of the land, he is still waiting for spring. If the Green Man is the spirit of the wildwood carved in stone, another figure is its flesh and blood lord, a hero who turned the forest itself into a weapon of justice. To understand his legend, one must first picture the England he inhabited. Imagine a land of rigid hierarchy where Norman lords ruled with an iron fist from their cold stone keeps. Imagine the infamous forest laws which declared vast tracts of woodland to be the king's private hunting grounds, making it a crime punishable by death for a starving peasant to kill a deer to feed his family. In this world of oppressive law and sanctioned cruelty, the forest was not a place of refuge. It was a place of temptation and terror until it became a kingdom in its own right. In the green dappled depths of Sherwood Forest, when the laws of men became crooked, an outlaw leader emerged. He is Robin Hood. His story is not one of conquering armies, but of resistance born from the land itself. Sherwood becomes more than a collection of trees. It is a green sanctuary, a sovereign territory with its own moral code. Here, Robin and his band of merry men do not merely commit crime. They practice a form of moral rectification. Imagine the scene. A portly abbot, his coffers heavy with tithes and taxes, travels the Great North Road. Suddenly, a horned blast echoes through the trees, and he is surrounded by men clad in Lincoln. But they do not merely take his gold. They invite him with a fearsome courtesy to a feast in the greenwood, where he is made to share his wealth not with a thief, but with the community. This is the essence of Robin Hood. He turns the act of theft into an act of profound social justice. He is the archetypal trickster hero, a man who exposes the hypocrisy of his society through humor and daring. He matches both wits and arrows with his great adversary, the Sheriff of Nottingham, who serves as the perfect personification of oppressive state-sanctioned authority. A key element of his legend is the use of disguises, particularly in the famous archery contests. Stripped of his noble title, Robin, disguised as a humble yeoman, proves his innate nobility by splitting his opponent's arrow with his own, showing that a man's true worth is not in his name, but in his skill and character. He is not a solitary hero. The fellowship of the merry men with the fiercely loyal Little John, the jovially militant Friar Tuck, and the brave Maid Marian represent a new kind of society built on a shared dream of justice. For centuries, scholars have debated whether he was a real man or a poetic invention born of popular ballads. But in the end, it does not matter. Robin Hood is the people's champion, and his kingdom, the Greenwood, remains the enduring symbol of a place where a better, fairer world is not only possible, but is worth fighting for. We now travel deeper beyond the sunlit glades of Robin Hood's fellowship into a darker, more ancient wood, a place haunted by more primal and terrifying power. Imagine yourself in the royal depths of Windsor Forest. But long after the sun has set, the familiar paths of the day twist and become strange. The wind moving through the ancient oaks sounds less like a rustle and more like a ragged breath. The air grows cold, and the ordinary sounds of the nocturnal forest fall silent. You have the distinct prickling sensation of being watched. This is the domain of a spectral huntsman who bows to no earthly crown. This is the hunting ground of Herne the Hunter. His appearance is a vision of primal terror. At the stroke of midnight, he rides a colossal figure, his face lost in shadow, but his silhouette unmistakable. From his head sprout the ants of a great stag, and as he moves, he rattles ghostly chains. His origin is a tangled knot of tragedy and dark magic. Some tales claim he was a royal gamekeeper who, having committed a transgression against the forest, took his own life upon a blasted, lightning-scarred oak tree, his soul forever bound to the place of his despair. A darker version tells of a hunter mortally gored by a stag, only to be saved by a mysterious stranger who bound the stag's antlers to his head, resurrecting him but damning him to ride the woods for eternity. In this, Herne is England's own leader of the wild hunt. That terrifying pan-European myth of a spectral cavalcade that streams across the winter sky. A portent of war, plague, and the death of kings. To see him is to feel the blood run cold. To know that you have looked upon something that straddles the worlds of man, beast, and God. The chains he wears evoke a sense of eternal guilt and punishment, while his antlers connect him to the horned gods of the pre-Christian past. His haunting of Windsor, the very heart of the monarchy's lands, is a powerful statement. It suggests that even here, beneath the veneer of civilization and royal authority, older, wilder forces are lurking. He is the untamable spirit of the wilderness, and his story is a stark warning that the betrayal of natural or moral laws, whether by a king or a commoner, invites a spectral retribution from which there is no escape. From the great gods and ghosts of the royal forests, we now move to the borders of human habitation, to the humble cottages and farmsteads, where the relationship with the unseen world is a far more intimate and daily affair. Picture a rural farmstead at the end of a long day of labor. The fire is banked in the hearth, its embers glowing in the darkness. The family is asleep, the house wrapped in a deep, quiet broken only by the sigh of the wind. This is the hour of the household spirit, a creature of the twilight who belongs to neither the royal court nor the village church. He is known by many names, but most famously as Park or Robin Goodfellow. He slips through the landscape, invisible unless he wishes otherwise, the quintessential domestic spirit. His existence is predicated on a deep-seated belief in a contract between the seen and the unseen worlds. If a family is tidy and respectful, if they leave a bowl of fresh cream or a slice of good bread by the half as a token of their gratitude, Puck will become their unseen helper. In the quiet of the night, while the mortals sleep, the sound of the butter churn might be heard, its dash moving on its own. The farmer might awaken to find his floors miraculously swept, his shoes mended, or his grain threshed in the barn. Puck is the unseen hand that brings order and prosperity, a reward for diligence and respect. But this relationship is a delicate one. If he is slighted, if the offering is forgotten, or worse, if he is spied upon, Puck's nature turns from helpful to mischievous. He will hide the farmer's tools, sour the milk, and tangle the manes of the horses into impossible knots. He delights in leading weary travelers astray, appearing as a flickering will of the wisp that dances over a bog, his mocking laughter echoing as his victim stumbles into the mire. He is a shape, shifter, and his fluid form reflects the very nature of the fairy realm. Unpredictable, immoral, and intensely proud. In his tricks, he serves as a moral enforcer on a small domestic scale. He exposes laziness, punishes pride, and reminds mortals to walk with humility through a world that is far more mysterious than they know. He is the perfect embodiment of the unpredictable spirit of the land, a being who demands respect and who teaches through both kindness and playful fear that the most important relationships are with the neighbors you cannot see from the great archetypes of the English wildwood. Our journey now takes us to the fringes of the land, to the windswept coasts and dark subterranean worlds where the spirits are as unique as the landscapes that shape them. In the far southwest, on the granite spine of Cornwall, the land itself is a creature of dualities. Above ground, there are the vast heather-clad moors, places of stark beauty and sudden disorienting mists where ancient stone circles stand like the broken teeth of the earth. And below, in the silent, suffocating darkness, lies a labyrinth of man-made tunnels, a world of mineral wealth and constant crushing danger. Each of these worlds has its own guardians, its own uncanny population. On the moors, in the hollows of the hedgerows, and in the shadow of the great granite tors dance the piskies. These are not the benevolent fairies of later Victorian fancy. They are the true wild spirits of the Cornish landscape. Small and mischievous, they are fond of dancing in circles under the moonlight. Their chattering laughter carried on the wind. To the local farmers, they could be a blessing or a curse. Leave out a bowl of milk or a crust of bread, and they might lend a hand with the chores, threshing a barn's worth of grain in a single night, but offend them, or worse, try to spy on them, and they would sour the milk, tangle the hair of sleeping maids, and ride the farmers' cults to exhaustion. Their greatest delight, however, was in leading mortals astray. To be piskiled was a common and terrifying experience. Imagine a traveler making his way home across the familiar moor. As twilight falls, the landmarks begin to shift and twist. A path he has walked 100 times now leads him in circles. The familiar tour on the horizon seems to recede with every step he takes. He is wrapped in a bubble of magical confusion, hearing the faint, mocking chuckles of the piskies just at the edge of his hearing. The only cure was to perform an act of inversion, to break the magical logic by turning a coat or a pocket inside out, a simple human act to disrupt the otherworldly spell. This belief personifies the moor itself, a beautiful and enchanting landscape that can in an instant become a treacherous and deadly labyrinth for the unwary. Music, but in Cornwall, another world exists, not on the moors but beneath them. Descend into the deep, damp blackness of a Cornish tin mine, and you enter a realm of constant, unnerving sound. The drip of water, the groan of timber supports, the distant ring of a pickaxe, and sometimes in the utter silence between shifts, the miners would hear another sound, a faint but distinct tapping from the unworked rock face. Talp, talp, talp. This was the sound of the knockers. These were the spirits of the mine, described as small bearded men, the ghosts, some said, of Jewish miners who had first worked the tin lode centuries ago. They were not malevolent, but they were deeply ambivalent, their nature mirroring the mine itself. They were known to steal tools left unattended or lead a miner on a fruitless chase for a phantom vein of awe. Yet they were also protectors. That faint tapping was often a premonition of danger, a warning of a coming collapse that would give the miners just enough time to escape. To disrespect them was to court disaster. And so a tradition was born, a simple act of reciprocity. When a miner sat down for his meal in the darkness, he would break off the crust of his pasty and toss it into a side tunnel as an offering, a gesture of thanks and a sign of respect. It was an act of sharing, making the knockers not just spirits, but partners in the dangerous work. This belief was so central to the Cornish identity that when the tin mines closed and the miners immigrated across the world, their spirits traveled with them. Legends of knockers are found in the mines of America, Australia, and South Africa. A piece of folklore that bound an immigrant community together. A shared memory of the helpful yet capricious spirits of the deep earth. If the piskies and knockers are spirits born of stone, other beings are born from the water, their nature reflecting the life and danger that pulls in the still places of the land. Imagine a village pond on a summer's day. Its surface a placid emerald blanket of duckweed, seemingly harmless and inviting. But beneath that green shroud, the water is cold and black and deep, and something waits. This is the lair of Jenny Greneth. She is a hag of the stagnant waters, her creature with green weed-like skin, long hair that floats like algae, and sharp needle-like teeth. She lurks just beneath the surface, her cold eyes glinting in the depths, waiting for the careless. She is a terror to the most vulnerable members of society, the children who play too close to the water's edge, and the elderly who might stoop to fill a bucket. With a sudden clawing pull, she snatches them by the ankles and drags them down to a watery grave. The name Jenny Green Teeth is sometimes given to the duckweed itself, a beautiful and chilling example of how folklore works. The story is a masterful piece of folk pedagogy, a survival tool that turns a generic environmental hazard into a memorable, terrifying monster. A parent's simple warning not to play near the stagnant pond is easily forgotten. But the image of a green-skinned hag with algae hair waiting just beneath the surface is a lesson a child will carry with them forever. A monster created to save lives. If Jenny Green Teeth is the intimate terror of the village pond, another spirit governs a landscape of water on a far grander scale, personifying the fragile ecology of an entire region. Travel to the vast, misty lowlands of the Lincolnshire Fens, a landscape that for centuries was neither fully land nor fully water. A world of marshes, reeds, and shifting waterways. Here the people believed in a diminutive old man clad in gray, with long white hair that resembled the mists of the marsh. He was Tiddeman, a spirit who controlled the levels of the water. In the 17th century, Dutch engineers were hired to drain the fens, to tame the wetlands, and turn them into profitable farmland. To the engineers, this was progress, the triumph of human ingenuity over a chaotic landscape. To the fensmen, it was a violation. They knew that the land's balance was governed by Tiddeman, and they knew he would not be pleased. As the dikes were built and the waters receded, Tiddeman retaliated. Fields were mysteriously flooded, livestock sickened, and a pestilence spread through the villages. He was the personified immune system of the wetlands, fighting back. The desperate villagers knew that they could not fight him. They had to appease him. Under a new moon, they gathered at the dike, and in a solemn ritual, they poured water back into the marsh, chanting their apologies to Tiddeman without a name. Plated the spirit relented, and the pestilence ceased. The legend is a powerful ecological parable, a story born from the conflict between human engineering and natural balance. A profound reminder that some forces of nature should not be dominated, but respected through a delicate and ongoing negotiation. Our final journey in this kingdom takes us to a place where the line between folklore and recorded history becomes impossibly blurred. In the 12th century, during the chaotic reign of King Stephen, villagers near Woolpit and Suffolk witnessed something that has puzzled historians and folklorists ever since. One harvest day, they discovered two small children emerging from one of the deep pits dug to trap wolves. Everything about them was strange. The fabric of their clothes was unfamiliar. They spoke a language no one could understand, and most unnervingly, their skin was a distinct shade of green. They were brought to the home of a local landowner, but they were terrified and refused all food until they were offered raw beans, which they devoured eagerly. The boy, who seemed younger and weaker, soon grew sick and died. But the girl survived. She gradually learned to eat other food, and over time the green hue of her skin faded to a normal pallor. Once she had learned English, she was able to tell her story. She claimed that she and her brother had come from a place called St. Martin's Land, a subterranean world where the sun never shone and everything was in a perpetual state of twilight. One day, she said they were tending their father's flocks when they heard a loud, beautiful sound, like the ringing of bells. They followed the sound through a cavern and suddenly found themselves in the bright, shocking sunlight of the English harvest where they were discovered. The tale of the green children of Woolpit endures because it resists easy explanation. Is it a highly distorted folk memory of a real forgotten event, perhaps of lost, or malnourished Flemish immigrant children? Is it a classic piece of fairy lore, a story of changelings who have wandered from their subterranean world? Or is it something more profound, an allegory for the experience of the outsider, the shock of cultural displacement, the tragedy of assimilation where one survives and the other is lost? The story leaves us with an unsettling and beautiful possibility that just beyond the veil of our own world, through a cavern or a wolf pit, lies another, and that sometimes its inhabitants find their way into ours. As our journey continues, the twilight deepens into a profound and fearful darkness. We move away from the spirits of place and into a realm of pure dread, a landscape haunted not by what lives in the soil, but by what comes for the soul. These are the tales told around the hearth on a stormy night, the whispers that kept travelers from the lonely roads and warned the curious to bolt their doors. These are the spectral omens, the monstrous beasts, and the terrifying consequences of sin made manifest. This is the folklore of fear itself, and its first and most iconic figures are the hounds of hell. Imagine a stormy night on the Suffolk coast. The wind howls in off the North Sea, rattling the windows of the cottages and tearing at the thatch. It is a night of chaos and divine judgment, a night when the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural world seem to dissolve in the rain. On nights like this, a creature of terrifying legend prowls the lanes and churchyards. It is a huge black dog the size of a calf with shaggy matted fur and eyes that burn like hot coals. This is Black Shock, the most famous of England's spectral hounds. His name, derived from an old word for demon, perfectly captures his nature. He is an omen of death, a silent padding herald of the grave. To meet his gaze is to be marked, to know with a chilling certainty that your time in the world of the living is drawing to a close, often within the year. His legend is not just a vague fireside tale. It is seared into the historical record. In the year 1577, during a particularly violent thunderstorm, the parishioners of St. Mary's Church at Bangor were huddled in prayer when the doors burst open. The colossal black hound, wreathed in lightning, raced down the aisle, killing 2 worshippers with a single brutal strike before vanishing. It then raced onto Blithburgh Church, several miles away, where it left its own enduring mark. As lightning struck the tower, the beast clawed at the great oak door, leaving deep scorched claw marks that are still visible today. These marks are a profound piece of physical folklore, a tangible link to a moment of supernatural terror. Black Shook serves as a powerful personification of the fears of a devoutly religious, yet deeply superstitious community. His appearance during a storm links pagan fears of chaos with Christian anxieties about divine judgment. The burning claw marks on the church door are a stark and terrifying message in the face of true primordial evil. Not even the house of God is a guaranteed sanctuary. The spectral hound is an archetype found across the nation, its form shifting with the local landscape. In the rugged dales and gills of Yorkshire, it is known as the Barist. While it often appears as a monstrous black dog with enormous teeth and claws, its true terror lies in its ability to shape-shift and become invisible, revealing itself only by the sound of rattling chains. These chains are a powerful symbol, echoing the burden of sin and the weight of unfinished business, suggesting the Barist is not just an omen, but a collector of damned souls. Unlike Black Shark's more sudden assaults, the Bar Guest's methods are more ritualistic, more intimately tied to the processes of death. Ballads tell of it joining funeral processions, a silent, unseen mourner walking alongside the living. It is said to lie across the threshold of a house where a person is about to die, an impossible supernatural barrier. To interfere with its vigil, to try and block its way, is to invite a terrible fate. The Bar Guest will strike, leaving a wound that will never heal, a physical manifestation of the lasting harm that comes from interfering with destiny. Its northern setting grounds the universal fear of death in the local moors and valleys, making the Barist a deeply personal and inescapable part of the landscape's soul. From the lone hounds that stalk the earth, we now look to the skies for a far more terrifying procession. Picture a wild winter night. The skeletal branches of the trees whip and claw at a bruised-looking sky. A storm is brewing, but this is no ordinary storm. From a distance comes the sound of a hunting horn, a sound that is both triumphant and utterly mournful. Then the baying of hounds, not a single pair, but a vast pack. And finally, the thunder of 100 hooves. This is the wild hunt, a ghostly cavalcade that gallops across the night sky. It is a myth that stretches across northern Europe, but in England it takes on its own unique character. The leader shifts depending on the local law. Sometimes it is a doomed king or nobleman, a figure like Herne the Hunter, cursed to ride for a broken oath. In other tellings, it is an ancient god, perhaps the Norse Odin, his old rights and powers demoted to a demonic procession. The hunt personifies the roar, destructive power of the winter storm, the thin veil between the living and the dead, made terrifyingly real. The hound's fiery eyes and relentless pursuit symbolize the inevitability of fate. And the hunters themselves are often the souls of the unbaptized and the damned, swept up into this eternal, furious chase. To be caught out in the open when the hunt rides is a terrifying ordeal. The unlucky mortal must throw themselves flat on the ground, face down, and not look up, lest they be swept away. Their soul forfeit to the ghostly host. The tale is a powerful warning that breaking oaths or living an impious life may doom one to an eternity, not of quiet damnation, but of endless violent wandering between the worlds. Not all monsters are born of ancient myth or divine judgment. Some are born from the careless sins of a single afternoon. Our story takes us to the river where in County Durham, where a young John Lamb, the heir to Lantern Castle, decides to skip church one Sunday to go fishing. His act of youthful impiety is immediately rewarded. He casts his line and feels a tremendous pull. But what he hauls from the river is no prize fish. It is a hideous slug-like creature, no bigger than his thumb, with rows of sharp teeth and an evil, uncanny look in its eyes. Disgusted, he tosses it down a nearby well and forgets all about it as he heads off to seek his fortune in the Crusades. But neglected responsibilities have a way of festering into calamities. In the hero's absence, the creature grows and grows. It becomes a monstrous serpent, a worm of colossal size, coiling its vast body around a local hill and terrorizing the countryside. It devours livestock, then children, its appetite insatiable. The worm becomes a living, breathing embodiment of the young lord's sin, a monstrous consequence that has matured in his absence. When Lambton returns, a hardened knight, he finds his lands in ruin and his people living in terror. Seeking advice from a wise woman, he is given a set of chilling instructions. He is to wear a suit of armor studded with spearheads and fight the beast in the river where it was born. But to break the curse that now hangs over his family, he must make a vow to kill the first living thing he sees after the battle. Lantern follows her advice. As the serpent wraps its crushing coils around him, the spikes on his armor tear it to pieces, and the river current carries the segments away before they can rejoin. But in his moment of victory, his plan to fulfill the vow goes airy. Instead of a hound being released as planned, his own father, overjoyed at seeing him alive, runs to greet him. Unable to commit patricide, Lambton breaks his vow. And though the monster is dead, his family line is doomed to 9 generations of violent, untimely deaths. The tale is a powerful and complex moral allegory, a story that blends Christian penance with pagan dragon-slaying motifs to teach a hard lesson. That some actions have consequences that echo far beyond our own lives, and that the weight of duty, once shirked, can become a curse that even the greatest heroism cannot fully break. From the great mythic monsters of the past, we end our journey into darkness with the creatures of the modern age. The beings born not of ancient ballads, but of whispered schoolyard rumors and local newspaper clippings. We travel first to the windswept expanse of Bodmin Moor in Cornwall, a landscape already rich with ancient lore. In the 20th century, a new story began to take hold. Farmers started reporting mutilated sheep and vanished ponies whispering of a sleek black creature, a panther cat with glowing yellow eyes slinking through the gore at dusk. The beast of Bodmin Moor became a modern legend, a crypt representing the persistence of the wild unknown at the very edge of our domesticated landscapes. The fear of livestock loss, an ancient anxiety for any rural community, was translated into the tale of a predator just out of sight. In the 1990s, the sightings became so numerous that the government was forced to commission an official inquiry. A fascinating moment where the tension between rationalism and folklore played out on a national stage. Though no conclusive evidence was ever found, the story endures, a testament to the human need to explain anomalies, to give a name and a shape to our fears. Music, a similar and perhaps even stranger phenomenon, occurred in the woods near a church in Moorrenon, Cornwall. In 1976, two young girls camping in the churchyard were terrified by the sight of a giant owl-like creature with glowing red eyes and pins-like claws hovering over the church tower. They fled, drawing a picture of what they called the Owl Man. The story, reported in local papers, sparked a series of subsequent sightings with witnesses describing a silver, gray man-sized bird that hovered soundlessly before vanishing. The Owlman of Mourne taps into a deep primal fear of the nocturnal predator and the uncanny humanoid. His appearance at a church juxtaposes ancient superstition with Christian sanctity, while the dreamlike, fleeting nature of the encounters highlights the blurred line between perception and imagination. Whether an escaped exotic pet, a collective hallucination, or something far stranger, the Owlman, like the beast of Bodmin Moor, demonstrates that our need to create monsters has not faded with time. The wilderness, even in a small, well-mapped country like England, still holds its mysteries. And the human imagination will always populate the shadows with things that have claws and wings and glowing red eyes. Our journey has taken us through the grand myths of the kingdom and into the dark heart of its wild places. We have faced the specters of the lonely roads and the monsters born of ancient sin. But now we must venture into a landscape of a different kind of terror. A place where the monsters are not born of nature or myth, but are forged in the crucible of human fear, greed, and fanaticism. This is a world where the line between accuser and accused, saint and sinner, becomes dangerously blurred. This is the realm of the witch trial, a place where neighbor turns against neighbor, and the deepest darkness is found not in a shadowy forest, but in the heart of the community itself. Our story begins in the shadow of a brooding and desolate hill in Lawnasher, Pendle Hill. In the early 17th century, this was a wild and lawless place, and in its shadow lived two poor rival families, the Demdikes and the Chaddocks. Both were headed by elderly widowed matriarchs who scraped a living on the absolute margins of society through a combination of begging, folk healing, and fortune-telling. They were cunning women, keepers of old charms and curses, figures who were both needed and deeply feared by their community. In 1612, this simmering cauldron of local rivalry and superstition boiled over. A young woman from the Demdike clan, Alice and Device, had an altercation with a peddler. When he refused her pins, she cursed him, and moments later, he suffered a stroke. Terrified by her own apparent power, Allison was brought before a local magistrate. Under interrogation, she confessed to witchcraft and, in a desperate attempt to shift blame, implicated her own family and their rivals, the Catox clan. This single confession lit a fuse that would consume the community. The investigation uncovered a supposed witches gathering at a place called Malson Tower, and the accusation spiraled, pulling in more and more people. The trial that followed at Lancaster became one of the most infamous in English history. The key to the prosecution's case was the testimony of a 9-year-old child, Janet Device, who with a chilling and articulate confidence testified against her own mother, her brother, and her sister. Her testimony, the weaponization of a child's innocence, sealed their fates. In the end, 10 people were hanged, their lives becoming a byword for the hysteria and social tensions of the age. The story of the Pendle Witches is not a tale of supernatural evil. It is a human tragedy, It is a stark and enduring narrative of how class tensions, family feuds, and religious paranoia can combine to create a real-world horror. A cautionary tale about the dangers of collective panic and the devastating human cost of a moral panic. Pendle Hill itself became a landscape of fear. Its looming presence a constant reminder of the persecution that had unfolded beneath it. If the Pendle trials were a localized storm of fear, it would take a single charismatic individual to turn that fear into a profitable and horrifying industry. During the chaos of the English Civil War, a period when the old structures of law and order had broken down, a young failed lawyer named Matthew Hopkins saw an opportunity. Backed by Puritan zeal and a keen eye for profit, he declared himself the Witchfinder General. For a fee, he would travel from village to village with his assistants, a grim entourage dedicated to rooting out the supposed servants of the devil. Hopkins was not a man of faith. He was a man who personified the corruption of legal authority and the institutionalization of paranoia. His methods were a grotesque theater of cruelty, a pseudo-science designed to reinforce a predetermined verdict of guilt. His assistants, known as prickers, would jab the accused with needles and bodkins, searching for the devil's mark, a patch of skin that would not bleed or feel pain, which was in reality often just a mole or a scar. His favorite and most infamous method was the swimming test. The accused, often an elderly woman, would have her thumbs bound to her opposite big toes and be tossed into a pond or river. The logic was a perfect diabolical trap. If she sank and drowned, she was innocent, her soul received by God. But if she floated, it was a sign that the pure water of baptism had rejected her, proving her a witch, and she would be hauled out and hanged. Innocence and death were conflated. Between 1644 and 1646, Hopkins's crusade of terror led to the executions of hundreds of people, earning him wealth and infamy in equal measure. He was a human monster, a charismatic zealot who expertly exploited the chaos of his time for power and profit. His own end is shrouded in legend. Some tales claim that he was eventually subjected to his own swimming test by a suspicious crowd, and when he floated was executed as a witch himself. While likely untrue, this folkloric end provides a sense of poetic justice, a necessary conclusion to a story that serves as a timeless warning against the charismatic figures who rise in times of uncertainty, offering simple answers to complex fears and leaving a trail of broken lives in their wake. Not all witches, however, are the victims of history. Some are the true monsters of folklore, beings born not of paranoia, but of a deep and corrosive sorrow. We travel to the limestone caves of Wookahole in Somerset, a place of natural wonder and deep echoing dread. The legend tells of a woman who, scorned in love, retreated from the world and into the dark, damp womb of the caves. There her bitterness and unresolved grief festered, curdling her into a witch. From her dark refuge, surrounded by her animal familiars, she cast curses on the nearby villages, ensuring that any new romance would fail. Any budding love would wither and die. She became the embodiment of bitterness, the destructive power of a heart that cannot heal. After years of heartache in the village, a monk from Glastonbury, a man of great faith who was himself said to have been jilted in his youth, ventured into the cave to confront her. The witch assailed him with spells and curses, but his faith acted as a shield. He sprinkled holy water taken from the river Axe into the cave's dark chambers, and the moment it touched the witch, she was instantly turned to stone, her petrified form frozen in a perpetual state of punishment. Today, visitors to the cave can still see the stalagmite known as the Witch of Wookey Hole, a powerful example of how myth merges with the natural landscape. The story is a potent reminder that curses often harm the curser most of all, and that the act of turning away from the world in grief can over time turn one into a monster. From the witches who serve evil, we turn to the saints who outweed it. In the tales of England, the devil is not an abstract concept, but a tangible and often surprisingly gullible presence. And his greatest adversary was not a knight in shining armor, but a humble hermit and blacksmith named Dunstan. One evening, the devil, drawn by the beautiful music of Dunstan's harp, paid a visit to his forge, hoping to tempt the holy man. Sensing the cloven hooves beneath a clever disguise, Dunstan played along, offering to shoe the devil's horse. Instead of a normal horseshoe, Dunstan pulled a red-hot shoe from the forge and nailed it directly to the devil's hoof. The searing pain caused the devil to roar loud enough to shake the countryside. He begged for mercy, but Dunstan refused until Satan swore a binding oath to never again enter a house that was protected by a horseshoe hung above the door. The pact sealed, Dunstan removed the shoe. The story is a masterful tale of ingenuity and faith. Dunstan's profession as a smith is key. He is a master of the elemental forces of fire and iron, a craftsman who can turn the tools of his trade into a spiritual armor. Nailing the horseshoe to the devil's hoof brilliantly reverses the predator-prey dynamic, humiliating evil and elevating the humble horseshoe to a universal protective charm. The story teaches that steadfastness and cleverness, the creative arts of music and metalwork, can outwit even the greatest tempter and provide a lasting protection for the entire community. The battle against the devil may be won with the clever application of faith and iron, but not all interactions with the unseen world are so straightforward. The realm of fairy, the other world that lies like a shimmering film over the English landscape, operates by a different set of rules. It is a world of glamour and illusion, and to pry into its secrets, to see it for what it truly is to invite a consequence that is as swift and as final as a slamming door. Our story finds itself with a figure who stands at the very threshold of life and death. A midwife. Imagine a wild and stormy night in Somerset. The midwife is roused from her sleep by a frantic knocking. At her door stands a strange small man, his eyes dark and urgent, who begs her to come attend a birth in a dwelling she has never seen. He leads her through the wind and the rain, not to a cottage, but to what seems to be a grand palace, its halls filled with gentle folk in fine silks, its hearths blazing with a warm, welcoming light. She performs her duties, and a healthy child is born. The strange man then hands her a small green vial of ointment, instructing her to anoint the baby's eyes. But he gives her a stark and absolute warning. On no account is she to touch the ointment to her own body. But as she works, a flicker of curiosity overcomes her. Perhaps it is an accidental smear or a deliberate fleeting touch, but she dabs a tiny amount of the ointment onto her right eye. In an instant, the world shatters. The grand palace dissolves around her. She is not in a hall of lords, but in a damp, dripping cave. The fine silks are nothing more than moldering cobwebs, and the gentle folk are revealed to be gnarled, uncanny little people. Their faces ancient and utterly inhuman. The glamour is broken. The ointment was not for healing. It was for seeing. It was forbidden knowledge, a key that unlocks the truth behind the illusion. Shaken, she finishes her work, takes her payment, and returns to her own world, keeping the terrifying secret to herself. Weeks later, at the local market, she is shocked to see the very same mysterious man from the cave, this time moving through the crowd, pilfering goods from the stalls, invisible to all but her. Forgetting the danger, she greets him. He turns to her, his face a mask of cold fury, and asks a chilling question. "Which eye do you see me with?" She points to her right eye, the one she anointed. He raises a finger, touches her eyelid, and her sight in that eye is extinguished forever. The story is a powerful and terrifying lesson. The midwife's punishment reflects the unwritten law of the other world. Humans are not meant to pry into its secrets. To gain the second sight, to see through the glamour, is to sacrifice a part of one's own wholeness. The tale is a profound warning that perception itself is a fragile thing, and that to see too much of the truth of the world just beyond our own is to risk being blinded by it. From the danger of seeing a hidden world, we turn to the peril of possessing a skill that seems to come from one. In the age of heroes, there lived a master craftsman, a figure whose abilities with the forge were so profound They were spoken of as a form of magic. He was Wayan the smith. The swords he forged would never break. The armor he hammered was impenetrable, and the jewelry he crafted held the light of the stars. But such genius inspires not only awe, but also a terrible greed. A ruthless king, hearing tales of Wayan's skill, captured him and brought him to his island fortress. The king did not simply want Wayan's treasures. He wanted to own the source of their creation. And so, in an act of unimaginable cruelty, he had the smith hamstrung, severing the tendons in his legs to ensure he could never escape. Wayan became the crippled artist, a prisoner forced to turn his divine gift to the service of a tyrant. But the king had made a fatal miscalculation. He had crippled Wan's body, but he had not broken his spirit or his cunning. In the dark of his forge, Wayland plotted a revenge of such cold artistic fury that it would become a legend. He lured the king's 2 young sons to his workshop with the promise of hidden treasure. There he murdered them, and what he did next was not the act of a simple killer, but of a vengeful artist. He took their skulls, mounted them in silver, and fashioned them into drinking goblets for the king's own table. He took their eyes and set them as jewels in a brooch, and their teeth he went to a necklace, which he presented as a gift to the king's daughter, whom he then seduced. He turned the objects of his revenge into works of terrible, exquisite beauty, forcing the king to unwittingly adorn himself and his family with the remnants of his own slaughtered children. Having completed his vengeance, Wayland used his smithing skills one last time for himself. He fashioned a pair of magnificent wings, and as the powerless king watched from below, he launched himself into the sky, his mocking laughter echoing over the water. Wan's story is a stark warning against the abuse of artistry by tyranny. It shows that true genius cannot be contained or owned, and that if you try to it will forge a vengeance that is as beautiful as it is horrific. Our final tale concerns a talisman created from the body of a criminal for a purely evil purpose. It is a legend that speaks to the deepest taboos, a story of how the dead can be made to serve the wicked. This is the legend of the Hand of Glory. Imagine a lonely inn on a remote road late at night. The family is asleep. The doors are barred. The world is quiet. A thief approaches, but he carries no tools to pick the locks. He carries something far more gruesome. A hand of glory is made from the severed, pickled left hand of a hanged murderer. A hand that has paid the ultimate price for its crimes. Into its dead fingers is placed a candle fashioned from the fat of that same dead man. The hand is a talisman of pure necrotic magic, a thing born of execution and desecration. The thief lights the fingers of the hand, and the flames that sputter to life are not of this world. They cast an eerie corpse light, and with them comes a powerful enchantment. Every soul within the house falls into a deep charmed sleep from which they cannot be woken. The locks on the doors spring open without a sound. The hand is a key made of flesh, a tool that unlocks the most secure household and renders its inhabitants utterly vulnerable. The story shows how evil feeds upon itself, how the dead hand of past crime is used to commit new transgressions. But in one famous telling, there's a flicker of hope. A vigilant serving girl, not yet asleep, glimpses the eerie hand through a window. Realizing her family is spellbound, she tries to douse the flames with water, but they only burn brighter. Desperate, she grabs a jug of milk, the symbol of purity and nurturing, and throws it on the hand. The flames are instantly extinguished, the spell is broken, and the household awakens. The thief is caught, and in a perfect turn of fate, is sent to the gallows. His own hand, perhaps destined to become the next hand of glory. The tale is a chilling reminder of the dark things that can be wrought from the violation of the dead. But it is also a lesson in vigilance, a promise that even the most potent and terrifying magic can be broken by the simple, wholesome things of this world. Music! Our journey through the whispering landscapes of England is now at an end. We have walked with the specter of a boy king who drew a sword from a stone, and we have stood in the shadow of a queen whose rage became a cleansing fire. We have feasted in the greenwood with noble outlaws, and we have listened for the phantom tap of the spirits in the deep dark mines. We have fled from the burning eyes of the spectral hounds that haunt the lonely lanes. And we have watched a humble smith nail a shoe to the devil's own hoof. From the grand sweeping matter of the nation to the intimate terrors that lurk in the dark of a single room, we have sought out the figures who haunt the English imagination. These beings, born of mist and memory, are more than just monsters and spirits. They are the living embodiment of a worldview, a complex and often beautiful map of the human soul and its relationship to the world. They give a face and a name to the profound mysteries of existence. In the furious charge of the wild hunt, we see the raw, untamable power of the winter storm. In the quiet, dutiful work of the household park, we see the delicate moral economy of reciprocity that once governed rural life.